Hi, I'm Alan Mendenhall, Associate Dean in the Sorrell College of Business at Troy University, and this is Success Stories, a show that highlights the lives and careers of people who have accomplished great things. I'm joined here today by Judge Eleni Roumel, who is on the U.S. Court of Federal Claims and is in town from Washington, D.C. Judge Roumel, thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you, Alan, for having me.
Well, it's really great to have you, and we'll start with just a very simple question for our audience, which is, what does the U.S. Court of Federal Claims do?
Sure. The U.S. Court of Federal Claims is a court of nationwide jurisdiction that hears claims for money against the U.S. government. So just as if you were to have a lawsuit against a private party in a U.S. District Court, the U.S. Court of Federal Claims has exclusive jurisdiction over all monetary claims against the U.S. government, with some exceptions for claims over $10,000.
Well, we have a judge who lives just down the road, Judge Eric Brugink, who I believe is retired
He's
now.
wonderful.
Yes, he lives
He's
just
still
an hour
pretty
away.
active. He's senior, but very active. And a wonderful, wonderful judge and a wonderful teacher to new judges.
Oh, that's great to know. Well, let's talk about sort of your life and how you got to where you got.
Sure.
So you were born in Washington, D.C., correct?
Yes.
And were you raised there?
I was raised in Maryland,
Okay.
right on the other side of the border.
And then you ended up in New Orleans at some point, but you went to Wake Forest. What happened between the time you were raised in Maryland and when you went to Wake Forest? Where did you go to high school?
Sure. I went to public school in Rockville, Maryland, and I have always loved school. I was very into history, politics, but also science.
Oh, wow.
At one point, I thought I wanted to be an astronaut. I interned for several summers at NASA, Goddard Space Flight Center, and really was sort of on that trajectory until I had an internship at the state's attorney's office in Montgomery County, Maryland, where I worked in a program called Operation Last Chance, which was a program for juvenile repeat offenders.
Okay.
Sort of not quite a scared straight, but sort of an education program. And I worked with prosecutors there, and it was a wonderful experience, and I really fell in love with the law.
Well, and how old were you when that took place?
I was probably about 16 years old.
Okay, so it was before college. Wow.
It was before college.
And what did you study at Wake Forest University?
I studied politics, and I was a biology minor. I've never lost the love of science.
Well, that's neat. And you went on and you actually went to Tulane University and got an MBA before you went to law school.
I got them at the same time. It was a 4-year
simultaneously.
program, a JD MBA program, and I really loved it. I loved the intersection of business and law.
And what made you decide to pursue that particular curriculum?
Sure. Besides my father, who encouraged that, I'd always been interested in business. I'd always followed the stock market.
Oh, interesting.
I had always thought about maybe running a small business, and I wanted to learn more about it. It was a great program, and Tulane has a wonderful, wonderful business school, which is conveniently located right next to the law school.
Yes.
And I took a chance and stayed an extra year and have never looked back. I used the skills that I obtained in the MBA program almost daily.
Wow.
And I'm so glad that I did it.
Well, that's good to know. As someone who is an administrator in a business school, it's great to have that testimony regarding the value of an MBA.
Absolutely.
Okay, so you mentioned your father. Was he a particular influence on you and your career choices and educational choices?
My parents are wonderful. I've really hit the lottery when it comes to parents.
Yeah, you can't choose those, can
No, you can't. Nobody in my family is a lawyer, though. My father worked for the National Institutes of Health and the Public Health Service and the University of Maryland. My mother was a teacher, a speech pathologist, and worked at the Department of Homeland Security in the Bush administration.
Oh, wow. So when you graduated from law school, you went immediately into private practice before a clerkship, which is, I think, more valuable for the judges you clerk for because you have a little experience under your belt. But tell us about how that process may be, I don't want to say inverted, but it's sort of atypical for someone to go into private practice and before they go into clerkship? Typically you hear somebody going
Absolutely.
straight to a clerkship.
And I'd say part of that was that I'd spent 4 years in graduate school with the
Right.
JD MBA program. I was ready to work, and even though I had a scholarship for the law school portion, I didn't for the business school portion. So I wanted to go out and make money, pay back student loans, and really get started with my career. I'd been in school a long time. And I'm so glad that I did it that way, and I actually try to hire clerks now with that experience.
That makes sense.
When you practice, and I started out at Skadden Arps, New York, which was a wonderful training ground, and I still have many friends there. I learned so much. You learn the ins and outs of discovery, summary judgment motions, motions to dismiss, what's a good argument, what's not a good argument. And when you go to clerk, you really have a leg up, I think, when you're assessing people's briefs or even speaking with the judge.
I completely agree. I actually had a similar experience where I was in private practice before I went and clerked, and I was working as a staff attorney for the Chief Justice of the Alabama Supreme Court. And I recall how often my experience from private practice really played out and helped in my work at the Supreme Court. So I completely agree with your assessment on the value of that. So then after you clerked, you went back into private practice,
I did.
2 different firms, and you attained the level of partner. Then you became Assistant General Counsel for the U.S. House of Representatives. We're gonna go through the entire resume here, but tell us about that transition to go from private practice to that type
Sure.
of position. How does that happen? Because it seems to be a pretty a pretty big leap.
It was, and again, people usually do it backwards. They usually do government service when they're younger and then
Yeah.
go to private practice. I did it the reverse. I sort of, made my money, made sure I got some good court experience, had a wide variety of clients. I worked for big firms. I worked in a smaller jurisdiction, Charleston, South Carolina, where I was in court quite a bit, and worked for mom and pops all the way up to big corporations. And you really sort of value the law in all of its respects. For me, I was moving back to Washington, D.C. to be near my family, and I really had always been interested in government service, really ever since the clerkship. I just loved it and had wanted to continue it. And I applied. There was an opening, and I applied and got the job at the House Office of General Counsel, which is a nonpartisan office within the House of Representatives that represents all the members and in litigation throughout the country. They have a statute that allows the members of the office to litigate without regard to the rules of admission in any state. So it pays to litigate where they make the laws.
Yes, that makes a lot of sense.
It was a great experience.
That would be just an incredible experience, and I know the experience that followed that was also incredible. But before we get to that, I want to jump back a step and talk about Montgomery Connection, because we were talking this morning before we started getting on camera about how you were walking around Montgomery here and revisiting Montgomery, because you actually spent some time here working in the office of Bill Pryor when he was Attorney General.
I did. That was my first job.
Oh, wow.
I was a 1L, and now Judge Pryor was a Tulane grad, and he came down to interview, and I took a job for the summer here in Montgomery working in the AG's office, and it was a wonderful experience. I met a lot of wonderful people. The office had such professionalism. I learned a lot from people there, and I really enjoyed my time in Montgomery, and it's great to be back. Even though it's been 24 years, it's great to be back and have the opportunity to visit the Rosa Parks Museum here in this building and see some of the sites and how the city's changed and evolved as well.
Well, I wore my New Orleans cufflinks for you,
saw.
because I know
I'm
you had
pleased.
the Tulane connection. But, so after you left the Assistant General Counsel's office for the U.S. House of Representatives, you became Deputy Counsel to Vice President Mike Pence. How did that transition happen?
It's not a job I ever applied for. It sort of goes to the tenet that if you do good work throughout your career, maybe people will take notice and you'll build a reputation of being a kind person, good to work with, and also doing good work. And they were looking for somebody who was a lawyer, not a policy person, an actual lawyer who knew the House and who knew oversight and things of that nature, and ethics also. and somebody recommended me, and I got a call out of the blue one day to come in and interview, which I did.
That's very neat. And what was it like working in the White House? Did you just coming into the office every day, the aura of that experience had to have been incredible?
It was a great honor. Just as, you know, working in the House was a great honor. It was a wonderful experience. It was very busy. At the time when I took the job, I had a 9-month-old.
Oh, wow.
And so, you know, juggling motherhood and the you know, great responsibilities of the office were significant. But I learned a lot. I met a lot of wonderful people, and it was great to see the country as well, and, you know, fly around to all the events, the official events all around.
Well, that's actually, it raises something that I would like to ask you, just advice for young people who are maybe considering careers but also motherhood, and how to balance the two. Do you have advice for young ladies who might be considering or are just struggling with the balance?
I think, you know, it's a very personal decision.
Yeah.
Everybody makes that decision for themselves, and you can't really know until you're in the moment. But I would say, look for a good boss.
Yeah.
Having a good boss, which I had both in Tom Hungar, who was the House General Counsel at the time, and Mike Pence and Matt Morgan, who was the counsel to the Vice President. Having those people who value family, who value professional women, who may provide a little flexibility, is very important. But also not to ignore your family.
Right.
You know, having my child has been the greatest joy of my life, and being able to do both has been exceptional. I've been very lucky. So I would say it's doable. It's very doable. Though there are ups and downs, but I'd say motherhood makes you very efficient.
I can say from the experience with fatherhood that efficiency is one of the virtues you gain from parenthood. But there may be some there may be things that I struggle with more, like patience. I'm not sure I'm as patient as I used to be. But so you were confirmed by the Senate in January 2020, and you were sworn in the next month by Mike Pence.
Yes.
And shortly thereafter, you became Chief Judge. So what was it like to become Chief Judge of the U.S. Court of Federal Claims so quickly as a new member of the court?
Sure. Well, we had a wonderful chief judge who became senior, so she could no longer serve. So I was appointed by the president to be chief judge, and I always viewed this role to be a steward for the court, a good steward. Being chief judge is like being a CEO. You deal with the finances, you deal with the security of the court, you deal with the IT of the court, and every small or large problem. And I really felt like my background with the MBA and also leading people in an organization, both at the White House and in private practice, really gave me the skill set I needed to be an effective chief judge, and again, to be a very good steward for the court and get us through what was an interesting time, because we had 5 new judges come on, so it's getting those people cases and offices and things like that as well. It was a great experience, and I'm glad that I had it.
Yeah, people think about the job of a judge, and what they don't consider is assigning staff email addresses or working with the marshals. You talked about working with the U.S. Marshals and all these duties that one would think would fall outside the scope of your professional responsibilities, but they don't. You really had an administrative function, and that to me is fascinating. Yes,
an administrative function, a representational function as well. Luckily, we have an amazing clerk of court, Lisa Reyes, at our court, and a truly fantastic staff who have been with the court quite a long time, so they make it easy for all of us.
Well, you've lived in a lot of places: D.C., Maryland, New York, Charleston, Montgomery, New Orleans. Where do you consider home now?
I consider Virginia home.
Virginia
Washington,
home.
D.C. area. My family's there. I live in Virginia, and that's where I consider home.
Okay, and so I want to go back to early education.
Yes.
So that maybe we're talking pre-college. You liked science. Were there any particular teachers who influenced you or who inspired you to pursue the path that you pursued? I know when you're young, you can't predict the different paths that you end up taking, but you can at least be inspired by somebody to take a path, and they usually don't turn out the way you expect. But
yeah, I go back to my parents at first. They were very encouraging of me generally, but also to be a reader. And I became a reader at a very early age. I love books. I would read as many as possible, and I think that was a great foundation for me. They also believed in education, and they stressed that, and that's really stuck with me. As far as teachers, I had a chemistry teacher who sort of plucked me out of the class for this NASA internship, Mrs. Kilborn, and I'm always very grateful to her for doing that. And I've had some great, even elementary school teachers, Mrs. Goldenson, Mrs. Stiefel, who really, you know, saw that I loved to read and really encouraged that skill set.
Well, and obviously in the law, reading is the equipment you need to do your job. I think lawyers probably, in particular judges, read and write more than any novelist, except for maybe Stephen King. He writes a lot. But the rigor of the reading is at a different level. I mean, reading law, reading cases is not easy. It's an exercise of the mind. And so all that reading that you did as a child was just training for the future, it sounds like.
I think so, and I think you have to love it.
You do.
Know, I love
That's
the
right.
law. I'm one of these people who loved law school from the very beginning, and you know, have loved every aspect of it. And if you love what you're doing and love the law, sort of this maybe denser reading doesn't come so difficult.
Well, we probably have viewers who are undergraduate students who are considering law school. So what advice would you have for them, maybe if it's a freshman or sophomore, about particular classes they should take, or if it's a junior or senior, what they ought to do to prepare themselves for the rigors of law school?
I think, you know, I think getting an internship for the summer or during the school year in a field, whether it's with a private firm or a prosecutor's office or a public defender's office, or you know, any sort of organization, to see if you like it. It's very important. Law school is a huge commitment. There is an opportunity cost to going. You really need to love it.
And a tuition cost for most students, a tuition cost as well.
It costs a lot of money, and it is a profession, and you should love your profession. So I would say, to the extent you can get an internship, try it out, see if you like it. As far as classes, I think anything that makes you think. A political philosophy class, history classes are very important. If there is a pre-law class, take the pre-law class, see if you like it. And then, you know, any sort of writing classes that you can take, I would take those as well. But really, anything that makes you think, and really, really puts a premium on that. Those sort of classes, seminar classes, are very much like law school.
Well, you seem very well-rounded, as if you're read
thank you.
in a lot of different areas. And do you
you.
think that has helped you in your legal career, advancing from private practice through government work up to now the judiciary?
I'd hope so.
It certainly hasn't hurt, I guess.
I hope so. I think I've also been open, you know, open to change. You know, I came into the law really loving IP, intellectual property. That's never left. And I've been open as I've gone through my career to keeping that, but also doing other things as well. And I think having an open mind and really being open to new experiences really helps with transition. I'll also say being a part of your community is very important, whether it's a bigger community or smaller community. I had always tried to do pro bono, Wills for Heroes. I volunteered at the homeless shelter, doing legal work for the residents there. And I think that being part of your legal community or your community at large makes the profession so much more enjoyable and helps you give back. The pro bono work is some of my most enjoyable work that I've done, and I really encourage people to do that. And I think it makes transition easier when you're part of a legal community that's so supportive.
That's really neat. Well, speaking of legal community, I think you would be interested in seeing our Attorney General's office now and how similar it probably is structured to when you were there. And so you were there when Bill Pryor was Attorney General, and he actually established the office of Solicitor General, and that precedent has continued on through the different attorneys general.
Oh, wow.
And I worked in Luther Strange's office when he was Attorney General, and I know, you know, a lot of the sort of housekeeping matters that Judge Pryor put into place when he was Attorney General were still being followed, and a lot of the precedents that he established were still there. And Steve Marshall, who's our Attorney General now, still follows a lot of the precedents that were set by Judge Pryor. So you were there at a formative time, whether you knew it or not. You were at a period.
I don't think I can take any credit for it. Just a mere observer.
This was your opportunity. You could have taken all the credit for it. No, but that really is an interesting thing to me. That you know, a lot of change has happened in and around Montgomery, as I think you probably observed how much just building and construction and development has occurred around this area. But a lot of things have also remained the same, which is very interesting. Okay, so just more general advice to young people, not specifically for people who are considering law school, but let's say people who are just unsure about what to do with their lives and their careers, and you know, they're trying to decide whether or where to go to college. So we're talking probably high school age students. What would you recommend to them about figuring out the future?
Oh my goodness.
I know, it's a big one.
Question.
Yes.
Well, I'll say twofold. For those who aren't in high school, maybe they're already in college or they're past that point, I would say doing a great job at whatever you're doing and putting your all into it is very important. People take notice. Taking the assignment that maybe nobody wants to take.
Yes.
I've done that quite a bit, and sometimes it turns into a great opportunity, and it has for me. Some of my best cases at the house were things that nobody else really wanted to take, and I just sort of volunteered, I'll do it. And they were incredibly rewarding. So I would say do a great job, try new things. It's okay to fail, and as long as you put your best foot forward. And you'll learn a lot. You'll look back and you'll learn a lot. For those in high school, I just had a high school student intern with me for the week, and he was trying to figure out what he wanted to do, and he was talking about where to go to college. And one of the things that we all sort of counseled him on is go to a place that has, you know, great classes where you feel comfortable. It's a good fit for you size-wise, but, you know, where you think, oh, they have some classes that I really think I might want to take. And, you know, places where, gosh, I could really take some classes where I can think and talk to my peers, and maybe I'm not just sitting in a huge seminar and just listening, where I can engage with people. I think that's very helpful to figuring out what you want to do.
And I'm really glad that you brought up the word failure, because you sort of redefined it in a way that was positive, right?
Oh,
that failure is just part of success, right? You're going to make mistakes, you're going to make errors. Nobody's flawless, nobody's perfect. And so trial and error is a learning process, right?
Absolutely.
You have to get questions wrong on an exam in order to learn from your mistakes, right? And it applies professionally as well, and in your career. And in law in particular, you're going to make mistakes, and hopefully they're not big ones, but they're going to happen because you can't be perfect.
True, and you know, in law, of course, you learn from it, but also in a career generally. For example, you know, science, I was interested in that, but maybe, you know, I was an okay student in science, not as great as I was in politics and history, but I always found a way to incorporate that into law, whether it be intellectual property law, and working with scientists and very creative people, sort of the best of America, you know, doing patent law. Or when I was at the White House working as a lawyer for the Space Council, I found a way to get back into the space world as a lawyer. there are ways to pivot, and you realize maybe I'm not meant to do this aspect of something I'm interested in, but I can find another way to do it that better suits me in some way.
And you enjoy what you do now, don't you?
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
It's the greatest honor of my life to be a judge, to be a federal judge, and I love it. I love working with the bar. I've been a persuader for 20 years as a lawyer, and now to be an adjudicator and to have that responsibility has been a wonderful thing. And also to work with young people, with my clerks, to teach them.
Yeah.
I really enjoy that aspect of the job quite a bit.
Well, it's such an interesting role in the grand scheme of things, because you have a large degree of fame, but you're not exactly signing autographs on airplanes.
No.
So it's, you get to enjoy some degree of anonymity, but also a large degree of prestige too. It's probably the perfect balance. What happens when you meet someone, let's say it's on an airplane, and they ask you, hey, what do you do for a living? And you tell them, what do they say?
Oh gosh, I am a pretty discreet person, so you know, I don't go sort of trumpeting myself.
Sure,
I'm a pretty humble
sure.
person, but you know, I'll use the opportunity to tell them a little bit about our court.
Yeah, I think that's a great opportunity to educate, because very few people know what the U.S. Court of Federal Claims does, including lawyers. We actually, Judge Bruggen, I mentioned him earlier, he gave a couple talks here in Montgomery, and one was to an audience of lawyers. And he was explaining to the lawyers what exactly the U.S. Court of Federal Claims did, because most of the audience was unaware of the function, which I thought was interesting.
And it's a very important and historical court. You know, it's been around since the 1850s in one form or another, and it really sort of underscores, you know, our democracy. It has an importance in our constitutional republic, I believe, that you can sue the federal government and bring a claim, a monetary claim against the federal government. To do that alone, a waiver of sovereign immunity is very important, but also to do it without fear of retribution, to get an impartial tribunal, to get a fair shake against the federal government is a remarkable thing, and we shouldn't take it for granted.
I think you're absolutely right, and that's a wonderful way to end. Judge Roumel, thank you so much for being here. I really enjoyed it, and I know our audience will too. This has been a program of the Sorrell College of Business. Again, the show is Success Stories, and I'm Alan Mendenhall, and thank you, Judge Roumel, for being here today.
Thank you for having me.